Hey everyone, so welcome to my single eyeshadow drawer. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through every single one of these shadows and swatch them all for you. I'm so excited about this video. I also have some, other shadows that I'm not going to swatch today. These are all of my stick shadows, liquid shadows. And there are some other ones scattered around that I'm still testing, so they're in another drawer. But this is my typical single eyeshadow drawer. I will leave all of the products that I swatch in today's video down below. If you do appreciate the video, giving it a thumbs up will let me know, or if you decide to purchase anything, you can use any of my links to help support my channel. And for everyone that does that, I really appreciate it. We're gonna do a little bit more of like a relaxing style video, so I hope that you guys enjoy it. And let's jump right in. So I'm going to start down here, I believe, with some Rituelle Defiant eyeshadows. Now, ironically, these do not swatch very well. As you can see, the hole in the top is very small. I'm definitely not the only person who has talked about this before. So first we're going to start off with Golden Age. I'm just going to use a Q-tip. This is the shade Anima. Just gonna adjust the light a little bit so you can see those better. But something that you can see immediately, this one is newer to me, and this one I've had for about 4 years. So you can see it is kind of at the end of its life. It has dried out a little bit, whereas Anima still has that really beautiful creamy texture that goes a little bit more of a long way. Next we have the shade Love Spell. This is still one of my favorite colors ever, especially if you all have green eyes. That will make your green eyes pop incredibly well. Next we have the shade Incantation. I have not used this one in a while. I almost kind of forget what the shade looks like, so I'm excited to swatch this one. Oh my gosh. It's perfect. You can see within these shades, there's just these little nuances. They're all very neutral, but they have this smoky, smoldery quality to them that just makes them so irresistible to me. If you go back on my channel, I've talked about these for a long time. And I think we can fit one more swatch on this hand, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go with Exuvier. This is a little bit similar to Incantation from what I remember. And those are some of the first swatches that we have. Next up we have the shade Half Light. Now this is quite old. I think this is maybe 5 years old. So this would definitely do well with a little bit of a setting mist just to get the pigment back up. It is the perfect kind of cool toned taupe. Yeah, you can see it's pretty much dried up now. I'm just gonna add a bit of a mist. There you go, that definitely helped. A bit of the warmth from my finger went a long way with that to really melt all the pigments back in. But this is definitely on its last leg, unfortunately. But if you can see that color, I just think it's absolutely perfect. You can see when I turn my hand how there are these warmer browns that come out, but you know, right away you get that kind of more taupey, cool toned base. It's very pretty. Perfect one and done for sure. And that is actually it for the Ash and Ember eye soot, but I also have their Celestial Sphere eye soot, Rituelle Defiant, and these are kind of like a cream gloss shadow hybrid. I'm really excited to show you guys these. They're really beautiful. So here you can see the Ash and Ember eye soot formula versus these insane glossy creams. These are not like, you know, if you don't like a creasy shadow, these will crease. They're more of like a texture product though, in my opinion. On top of a look, they just add so much depth and dimension and texture. It's the shade Serpens for you guys. And lastly, a shade that I'm not sure if you can get anymore, maybe on their website. It's Andromeda, and I am a big fan of this one too. There they are. All right, we're gonna get these back in here. Next, let's swatch some of my Urban Decay Moondust eyeshadows. I also have the original packaging in here as well, and we can look at those in a second. First, we have the shade Space Cowboy, an ultimate classic in my collection and one I've loved for years. It is the most perfect beigey, wet-looking eyeshadow. Really the epitome of wet-looking eyeshadows. You really can't beat it. Though I have a lot that I'll show you guys in a second. To give you an idea of what's sparkly but not wet-looking, let me swatch the shade Cosmic for you. Now this is still really beautiful. It's very pearly, but what you'll notice is a difference in the base pigment itself. So you see how it's very pretty and sparkly, but this has more contrast. And when you create a wet looking eyeshadow, contrast actually really helps, and this one does not have that. So this one ends up looking even more wet. Another example of that contrast is the shade Lithium. Now this has contrast and a very wet appearance on the lid. It's one of my favorite shadows of the year. There it is. So do you see how this one just doesn't look quite as sparkly? God, Lithium just really does it for me. These are some of my favorite shadows, and I love the packaging. They're really easy to stack in here, which I really like. All right, guys, bear with me if it's not quite in focus for the entirety of the time. I'm working with a new camera, so it is, you know, a new process for me. Let's swatch some K-Beauty shadows. I have one of these Misha Prism shadows that I am not a huge fan of. I'm honestly not even sure what shade this is. It looks fine. It's just a little bit too subtle for what I typically like. However, I do have this Biba shadow that I love, and it's in the shade Red Bean right on top. It's just a really nice and silky satin shade, buildable, just nice for like an everyday kind of product. It's just a little bit more difficult to find here in the United States. Oh, sorry, my dog's getting comfortable over there. One last shadow from Biba. This is the shade 04. I haven't worn this one in a while. This is a newer product to me. It is the Lux Shadow from Bobbi Brown. Really cool formula. Quite dry, but it brings a lot of impact and a lot of sparkle. If you're just looking for a nice glittery gold shadow with a little bit more of that kind of dry topper texture, this is definitely one that you might look into. Let's do some of these odds and ends kind of shadows. This is a very old shadow. It's from NARS, but I haven't been able to find another color like it. It's the shade Desdemona. Look at that depth. It reminds me of a lot of the Rituelle Defiant shades that we just swatched. And this one from Dose of Colors. It's the shade Lock and Key. It's just more of a glittery shadow. This one really, really brings the sparkle. On the eyes, I think it can look a little bit dry sometimes, so I don't reach for it a ton. Now we have a couple of L'Oreal eyeshadows that I wanted to share with you guys. This is the shade Amber Rush. These are kind of shadow glitter toppers. You can wear them on their own though. Amber Rush is a shadow that folks have loved for a long time. It's kind of like a drugstore cult classic. You can see that pigment goes a really long way. I think it's really pretty. It is a little bit more rose gold than I typically like. And this is the shade Golden Emerald. I was particularly interested in this shade because I love everything green. It is a very unique green too. It's like very mermaidy. There's blue to it, teal. Now these are not actually eyeshadows. These are just kind of crystal reflectors. You can use these as highlights, shadows, whatever. This one is from Stila. This one has more of that kind of stiff putty texture. It's the shade Silver Lake. Here is the Quartz reflector from Makeup by Mario. Again, more of a dry formula, at least compared to the Stila. You definitely don't need both, but if you want something to just add a wet look to any look, something like this is really nice to just tap on the lids and be done. Now lastly, for this area over here, we have 3 Cosmetics eyeshadows. This is the shade Luna. Super foiled. Star Child. And the shade Wish. Now we have this row right here. Let's start off with these little palettes. No, they're not single shadows, but they do fit very nicely in this drawer. This is the Not Just Nudes palette. This is a really nice, affordable cream shadow palette if you're not worried about like longevity. This one is Precious Metals. I love this blue shade. By the way, I know my nails are going to be covered in eyeshadow by the end of this video, so let's collectively try to ignore that. And I think my favorite shade is this shade right here. Same thing goes with my Rowan quads. We have the 1111, definitely one of my favorites. This shade is very, very glittery. Kind of gives you this textured, glittery effect. It does melt down in the finger, but I think it's more meant for a textured effect rather than something super smooth. This shade is absolutely gorgeous. This is one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes, by the way. Another classic. Perfect spring palette. I love using this in the spring. And lastly, this gorgeous orange shade. There it is. Next we have a shadow from AOA. Very reminiscent of the ColourPop shadows. This is the shade Holiday. I need to bring this back out. It's very pretty. One that is similar but a little bit stiffer is the Essence Melted Chrome eyeshadow. This is the shade Zinc About You. Two wildly metallic single shadows. I have this shadow that I think is unfortunately discontinued from, it was the Pop Sugar line. And this is Shine Bright. When I found this, I was really excited about it. I did a whole look with it. It's very reminiscent of the Stila and Makeup by Mario kind of crystal reflectors. There it is down here. Very, very pretty. I think we finally might be ready to tackle all of my Sephora collection colorful shadows. So let's take all of these out. This is the shade First Light. It's a champagne with a strong yellow shift. We have To the Moon and Back. This has a little bit more of a creamy texture, almost similar to the Cosmetics shadows we swatched. See how it has that kind of similar creamy foiled texture. Then we have a new favorite of mine, which is Fantasia. All of these have a little bit of a different formula. I like this one the most because it's so thin. It's a little bit lighter weight on the eyes than, you know, that really creamy metallic. My absolute favorite though is this one. It's Choco XS. Look at that. It has this wonderful sheerness to it. Very, very blendable. It has those little wet sparkles to it too. So yeah, that's definitely a favorite. The last two, this is the shade Demanding. Really nice for more of a true gold shade. And this has a little bit of a creamier texture. And it's the shade Shock Chalk. It is a very perfect smoky shadow. Look at that. Almost has a touch of purple to it. Very, very pretty. Let's talk about all of my Kaja trios. So first we have the glowing Guava trio. I apologize, I can't get all of the glitter off of my hands at this point. But this is the matte. This is the metallic. Absolutely beautiful. And then we have one more matte at the bottom. And that is the glowing Guava trio. Next, we have the Peach Madeline trio. This is one of the newer ones. We have this very thick metallic on here. You don't need much of this. Have a really pretty thinner metallic. I have more preference to a metallic like this. It looks a little bit thinner on the eyes. And then lastly, we have a very pretty matte, which I am doing a bad job of swatching right now. And that is Peach Madeline. Next we have Orange Blossom, which is one of my favorites. On top, we have a kind of pink to gold shimmer. Very, very pretty. We have what I think is the star of the show, which is this absolutely epic metallic. Just the impact of that shade is wild. And then this really perfect everyday metallic brown. Look at the way that shears out too. Lastly, we have the Mauve Bouquet trio. Again, same thing, one of those really strong, heavy metallics. They're almost like a chrome. Then my personal favorite, Again, one of the thinner metallics. Very, very pretty mauve metallic. Really like that one. And then we have the matte on the bottom. There's purple to it, but it's not overly purple, which I like. There we go. All right, cleansing oil to the rescue. That got a lot of the spare glitter off my hands, which is good. We have a Holika shadow here. This is more being kept for reference because this looks very dry on the eyes. It's the shade 02. Looks really pretty swatched out though, just on the eyes. It almost looks like flaking skin. I know it's kind of gross, but it is true. And this is a product I haven't swatched in so long. It's the Makeup Forever Starlit Powder, the shade 13. Ooh, there goes all that glitter. It's very soft. You can see, and you know, if you added like an inglot mixing medium to that, you could get a little bit more of a foiled look. But I should pull this back out and play with it a little bit more. One more shadow to swatch on this hand is the Misha Dewy Glossy Eyes. And this is the shade Honey Roast. Really nice texture. Very sheer. For me, it's like the epitome of like a K-Beauty sheer glitter. Just not one of my favorite wet looking eyeshadows, but it is pretty. Now we have these Moira eyeshadows, the Lucent Cream Shadows, and this is the shade Infinity. Definitely an incredible metallic shadow. This is one of my favorites. I actually prefer these to the formula of like the Cosmetics one. I think these are also way more affordable. This is the shade Jupiter. This is a little bit more pinky. They're both very pretty though. And then lastly, the shade Saturn, which is a very, very bright yellow gold with all these multi-dimensional shimmers to it. And one shadow that I know is hiding is this one from Kjaer Weis, the shade Alluring. I think the Kjaer Weis cream shadows are really underrated because they're more understated. Get in there. But they're really, really nice for a natural wash of color over the eyes. As you can see, we have all of these old Moon Dust shadows from Urban Decay. This was the shade Diamond Dog. When they didn't bring back this shade, I was very upset because, well, you're about to see why. It's absolutely gorgeous. Very similar to Lithium, but it is a little bit different. This one is a little bit more sheer. Really happy that I still have this though. Now I have Space Cowboy. I picked this up when I thought that they were discontinuing the Moondust shadows or reformulating. So this one is pretty much completely new, but I do have my original here, which I'll show you. This is the first one that I ever bought, and it is shattered. Just a couple pieces left, but I'm definitely keeping it. This is the shade Solstice, which they have come back with, but I just didn't pick it up in the new packaging. It's that gorgeous kind of red, blue, wet shift. This is definitely a pretty one if you like to experiment with a little bit of color. This over top of a brown shadow, you guys, that's pretty. And lastly, this is a shade that they also did not bring back. It's the shade Glitter Rock. It is just kind of a pressed glitter. Not much base pigment to this one. It's pretty. It was never one of my favorites though. It's pretty, but again, when you have like Space Cowboy, hard to compete. Right behind them we have my Ulta Beauty Bouncy Cream Shadows, which I have been a fan of for also a long time. They're kind of like my hidden gem that I told like everyone about. Haven't worn them in a little bit actually, so let's get to swatching. First, let's start off with unfortunately one of their discontinued shades, which is Maple Pecan. Is this discontinued? I think it is, unfortunately, guys. Kind of like the perfect everyday brown, taupey, gorgeous kind of satin shade. Just so easy to wear and to use. And then we have Italian Ice, which you can still get and is, I think, a favorite of mine. This one has, broken up a little bit, but never affects the formula if you get one that has kind of come loose in the pan. Look at this. It's so freaking pretty. You can see that one has a little bit more glitter reflection. It's a little bit more sheer as well, but very, very pretty. It's just perfect for like that model off duty kind of eye. And this is the shade Champagne Sorbet. This is definitely going to be a favorite for a lot of you if you prefer a champagne shade. I lean obviously more towards taupes, but there it is. Right at the top. Very pretty. And lastly, we have the shade Honeycomb, which is not much like a honey shade, though it does have a nice honey glitter throughout. It's kind of like a smoky green with those little golden glitters throughout. Next, let's take a look at my NYX Shadows. These are called the Foil Play Cream Shadows. May be being discontinued, but I will talk about a shadow in a second that you can still get that has this similar kind of whipped mousse cream formula. And this is the shade Smart Mouth. A lot of pigment comes off of these. I will say the colors are a bit on the nose, is how I've described them before. They are pretty though. This is the shade Beauty Buzz, which is definitely a favorite. If you like the Rowan shadows, you'll probably be a fan of these, if you can still find them. We have Woman of Steel. Just a very silvery, just like a basic silver. And my favorite, which is the shade Baroque. This gorgeous molten bronze. Very, very pretty. I apologize if I'm saying like very, very pretty, super pretty, like over and over, but there it is. And I don't know about you, but I think that is very, very pretty and super pretty. Next, we have a couple of glitters from LA Girl. I have the shade Hollow Glam, which is kind of like this more white glitter with a little bit of blue. Very gritty. These are not, I wouldn't apply them to the eyes in the way I'm swatching them, just because, again, gritty, but very, very pretty, especially if you love a good duochrome. The texture is almost sandy. I also have the shade Ooh La La, which again still has that more glittery, sandy texture. Really pretty to tap on the lids. You can see those glitters really shine when you kind of press them in. So that's how I would recommend applying these, but they're quite pretty. Let's venture forth, shall we? I did mention that I have a couple of eyeshadows that are similar to the ones from NYX. And these are the Priz Metals from JCat. And I have two shades here. This is the shade Frosty Foil. This one's kind of like a moussey glitter. As you can see, it doesn't have a ton of a base pigment. And then this shade, which is my personal favorite, is the shade Chrome Crusher. And take a look at this. I mean, I feel like you could find a shade like this from like Tom Ford. So much dimension to that. So again, very similar formula to the ones we talked about from NYX, but they're in a little bit more of these kind of chromy metal shades. Speaking of foiled shades, this is from Ulta Beauty. It's the Lustrous Foil Shadow. It does have a top on it. It is very loosely pressed, so you want to be careful with it. And this is the shade Rose Gold Leaf. Give you guys a swatch. Super pretty. This one does a good job of, you know, you can tap it in to get that really glittery effect, and it also kind of melts down into the skin if you prefer that kind of look. And of course, like everything from Ulta, from their line at least, it is affordable. And lastly, I see one little straggler back here. This is from MAC. It's the Dazzle Shadow in the shade Smoky Mauve. Swatch this one right at the bottom. This is a new to me shadow that I've been really loving this year. It's exactly what it's called. It's a smoky mauve, and I think that if you love shades like this, if you love playing around with purples, then there's a good chance you'll be into this one. Next up we have all of these ColourPop shadows to swatch. Some are still available, some are not, so just keep that in mind. First up we have the shade A Little Quirky, which is, I believe, Broken. There it is. It's a very, very pretty shade though. I love the Super Shock shadows that lean more on the glittery side. That one is just absolutely gorgeous. Another favorite, which is the shade Cosmic Charge, is one I'm not sure if they still have available. They go in and out of stock, as you guys probably know, but I will try my best to leave everything linked for you all. And there is Cosmic Charge, one of my absolute favorite shadows. I wish I could wear it more, but again, it's just hard to find, so I try to avoid at least wearing it on camera. We have one of the matte shadows here, which is the shade Hanky Panky, which I love because my dog's name is Hank. This one's a little bit dried out now. These mattes will eventually kind of dry up, but it's a really nice kind of putty texture to this one. Really nice basic crease shade. Definitely used to be more pigmented than it is now. So have this shade right here, which is the shade Secret Garden. Here are the next four that I will swatch for you all. My all-time fave is the shade Ritz. If you are a lover of wet-looking eyeshadows, this is one to definitely pick up. It's pretty much the closest you'll find to the shade Space Cowboy from Urban Decay. See how it has that gorgeous beigey base to it with that wet sparkle? Next up we have the shade Plume. Pretty sure this is the shade Plume, but the back has rubbed off a little bit. There is Plume. Let me build that up for you guys a little bit. I feel like you can't really tell too well from that swatch. It's kind of like a peachy pink. Next up we have the shade Sail Away. This one I don't like as much as Ritz, but it is pretty. More of just a classic kind of champagne shade. Has a nice wet reflect to it, but could be better in my opinion. And this is the shade Plume. Oh, so I'm not sure what shade this is. If any of you guys have an idea, let me know down below. That's gorgeous. There you go. There are four more of the Super Shocks. Okay, first we have the shade Couche, which I do not like very much. It's just a little bit too silvery. It doesn't really have a ton of reflection that to me looks pretty on the eyes. mean, I know the swatch looks nice, but something about the way it looks on the eyes appears a little bit flat to me. But we do have this shade in Ice Dream, and this one is very wet looking and reflective, especially if you like a good duochrome. This one, you can see the difference between the reflection. So you see how that one just has, it's a different kind of reflection. It's one that I prefer. This one is kind of one note. This is the shade Tassel, which is fine. It's pretty similar to Cosmic from the Moondust line. Just a kind of icy basic shadow. I don't reach for it all too much. And lastly, we have another matte shadow, which is the shade Waddles. And I really hope they decide to bring this one back. I mean, I say it's a matte, but it's almost like a satin. You can see it has like this nice, pretty shift to it. Very silky. And those are the last four. All right, let's start down here, shall we? We have two of the shimmer shades from Supergoop. Here is my favorite shade. It's the shade Sunset. Beautiful, creamy, moussey texture. Really a perfect one and done. It has that golden shift to it. Khaki actually is the one that let me swatch this in person with her, and I was sold. And then I also have this shade here, which is Daydream. Same really pretty texture. This one I don't think is quite as reflective. It's a little bit more subdued. Sunset is definitely my favorite of the two. Next we have a couple of color tattoos from Maybelline. One I like, one I don't. I have the shade Urbanite and High Roller. So let's start with High Roller since this is my fave. It is very expensive looking, just the shade itself. These also last really well. Look at that. Look at that. It's so pretty. Such a perfect, affordable one and done shadow. If you guys want to see an affordable one and done shadow video as well as a best and worst affordable cream shadow video, let me know. I obviously have a lot to talk about. Here's Urbanite, and it just looks a bit dry on my eyes. I think the mattes are not my favorite from the color tattoos, but the ones from Revlon I really like, so let's talk about those. First, we have the shade Pistachio, which is a really pretty, slightly glittery satin green. Icy green. Very pretty. Next, we have Caramel, which is a fave of mine. If you want that perfect one and done shadow on a budget, like Model Off Duty, it's that shade. We also have the shade Praline, which is fine. It's not my favorite. You can see it just a little lackluster. Two more. I have the shade Chocolate, which this one has cracked. As they get older, they do dry out a little bit, but they do still have good pigmentation. Great for the crease. It'll really lock everything in. So that's the shade Chocolate. And lastly, the shade Espresso, which I love. It's a gorgeous cool toned brown. Swatch it right at the top. And there you are. Let's talk about some luxury shadows, shall we? I have two here from Chanel. Talk about the shade New Moon Burst. It is unfortunately discontinued, I believe, but it is one of my favorites. If you know of a good dupe, let me know. Because I don't think that there's another shade like this. It's the most perfect purpley taupe brown, incredibly wet looking. If you've tried it, you know the magic of this one. Really unlike anything else I've ever tried. Pantene bronze is expensive, but it is really beautiful. I do love the kind of green tone to this gold that it has. That's one thing that you always get with luxury. You get like really unique kind of colors. I think that's what I expect from luxury, at least. Now we have some Tom Ford shadows. First we have a classic, which is the shade Platinum. I love Platinum so much. As far as a one and done shade, it's really hard to go wrong with this one. It also lasts a little bit longer than something like the Charlotte Tilbury Eyes to Mesmerize, which we'll talk about in a second. Yeah, as far as Tom Ford shadows go, this is still my favorite. It's an original, it's a classic for a reason. I have tried some of their other cream color for eyes, and this one's still my favorite. I think that the color and the formula of this one is hard to beat. I also have some of the cream and powder duos. This is my favorite of the two, which is Naked Bronze. That really nice moussey texture. There it is right there. Such a gorgeous shade. Then we have the glitter on top, which I will layer. That is quite the combo. It's my perfect smoky eyeshadow look. Smoky, but it also has this gorgeous wet reflect to it. And this is the shade Peach. Golden Peach, I should say. Oh, and it's pretty, but I don't know if I like it as much as Naked Bronze. Personally, I think it's just, you know, about what kind of shades you prefer. There's that glitter on top. You can see from the swatches, Tom Ford can make a really pretty cream eyeshadow. Next we have my Natasha Denona Chroma Crystal Top Coats. Certainly an old favorite. And first I have this shade, my most used, which is the shade Peach. If you've never felt this texture before, it's something between a glitter and a cream. It has this gorgeous kind of wet feeling in the finger, and it's just immaculate wet shimmer. It was, you know, for me, you know, it's the first of its kind. I do have another one that's similar, which is now discontinued, so still, this is like the only of its kind. It's been a staple in my routine for years. If you love that kind of peachy, gorgeous, wet shimmer, you know, this is still one of my most favorite shadows. And here's the shade Gray Brown. I don't use it quite as much, just because it's a little bit less wearable for me personally. But it is beautiful. If you are a cool-toned lover, gotta look at this. Look at that. Holy cow. These are absolutely gorgeous, and if I were to ever create makeup, I feel like this is the kind of shadow that I would be interested in doing. So beautiful. Next up we have my Charlotte Tilbury Eyes to Mesmerize shadows, and I have 4 different ones. First up we have Oyster Pearl, one of my favorite shadows of all time. The shade, the creamy texture, I could just look at it all day. It is the most perfect one and done model off duty shade. That gorgeous brown warmth with that overtop, with that taupe shift is just absolute perfection. I will never get tired of that shadow. Next we have the shade Mona Lisa, which I believe is now chocolate bronze, and I do like this one. I don't like it as much as Oyster Pearl, but I do like it. I mean, that's a chocolate bronze for you. I also have the shade Sunset Rose, which is pretty again, but it's hard, you know, because I love Oyster Pearl so much. I don't think that these shades are as gorgeous. But there is Sunset Rose. If you like a rose gold, it is very pretty. And lastly, I think the one that I do really like that I recently got is Star Gold. I don't have a lot of these shades in my collection, but I'm really glad that I picked up this one in this formula. Because look at that. It's just like true gold. Very, very pretty. And if you have brown eyes, oh my god, absolutely epic on you. Even if you have blue eyes, I feel like that would look gorgeous. Next we have 3 of the Hourglass Scattered Lights, as well as 3 of the Bodyography Pigments. Now I did recently pick up some new Bodyography Pigments that I've been trying for an updated one and done shadow video, but let's first start off with my Hourglass pigments here. First we have the shade Smoke. Very pretty. Next we have the shade Vivid. It's gorgeous yellow, green, gold. And finally I have the shade Rapture. The main difference between these and the Bodyography pigments, in my opinion, is that these are a little bit more finely milled. They're not quite as foiled looking. I actually do slightly prefer this texture, but there are times where I do prefer the Bodyography, so I think it just depends on the look that I'm going for. Next we have the Bodyography pigments here. Got the shade Stellar. See how much, just how a little bit goes a long way with these. Way more impactful. We have the shade Off the Hook, which is certainly, I would say, my favorite. Look at that. Ugh. Just the perfect sparkly taupe shade. And lastly, we have the shade Sparkler. This is not my kind of shade, but I can see why a lot of people would really like it. Alright everyone, next we have a couple of odds and ends as far as shadows go. The Eyes to Kill Stellar Shadow from Giorgio Armani is gorgeous. Not enough people talk about these. This is the shade number 2. They're very similar to the ColourPop formula. It's just a little bit silkier. You know, it's a little bit more subdued. For me, it's good for like everyday. Very plush, never drying on the eyes. I think would be really good for mature eyes as well. Next we have a shadow from Nina, and this is the shade 313. I was so excited about this, but just not my favorite. It's a bit dry on the eyes. Great color though. I was hoping it was going to be a dupe for the Eyes to Mesmerize, but it was not. I have the shade Daily Dreams from Incredible, and this is, as you can see, a pigment. It's very dry, but look at what happens when you kind of massage it onto the skin. It's like really comes alive, and it's so multi-dimensional. There's pink and blue and purple. It's just such a gorgeous color. And I know we can fit one more swatch on this hand, so I'm going to go ahead and pick up this one from Auric. This is the shade Temper, and it is pretty. I haven't worn this in a while though. There's the cream, and then you just add the glitter right on top. Out of all of these, I'm like, wow, that's pretty. So let's talk about these top coats from Jaclyn Cosmetics. So they're called the Shimmering Top Coats, and these are very similar to the Natasha Denona Chroma Crystal Top Coats. Let me show you the shades I have. They are discontinued, unfortunately, but this is the shade Glassy, basically Natasha Denona Peach. Oh, it's stunning. Look at that. North Star. God, that's pretty. And lastly, we have Tinsel. Look at these guys. I never would have expected this kind of launch from Jaclyn Cosmetics, but I am very, very happy with it. Okay guys, we are in the home stretch here. So I actually have a bunch of these Lorac shadows that I wanted to talk about with you guys. Definitely a shadow that will dry up on you. As you can see, they kind of dry out and pop out. So this is the shade Cashmere. This shade's actually really nice. out of all of the shades, this one for me has performed the most consistently, and it is smooth. It's kind of like a cross between like a Scattered Light from Hourglass and a putty shadow. Very interesting formula. Next we have the shade Velvet, and if I'm correct, this is the shade I was really disappointed in. Yes, it's very dry. That just has a lot of potential, but unfortunately it does not perform. And this is the shade Silk. This one is not dried out, which is wonderful. Very creamy and beautiful. You know, it's kind of hit or miss with these, but I mean, you can't deny that the colors are gorgeous. Next, we have the shade Suede. You can see this one is dried out, but I kind of like broke it up and it did work out. And this shade is really pretty as well, as you can see. Very Tom Ford-esque. I think I need to give these guys another shot because they were kind of annoying me with the dried out situation, but there are definitely some shades that will perform, and it is the shade Lace. Swatch it up there for you guys. Look at that. You know what? I need to give these another go. I mean, these swatches are freaking incredible, except for that one. Now, let's get into some of my Phytosurgeon shadows. I have a bunch of their Flash Fluorescence shadows, so let's get swatching. First, we have the shade Pewtered Pine. There is a little bit of a stronger swatch for you guys. These really can build up nicely. I always like to kind of make a nick in these for the most pigment. Next, I think we have one of my favorite Phytosurgeon's products ever, which is the shade Wild Oak. It lasts so well on the eyes. It's just freaking beautiful. It is a little bit more of a dry formula, which actually means that these last really well. Like for oily skin, I would certainly recommend them. But if you have more dry skin like I do, I just recommend really warming them up with a brush or a finger. That shade is just, it calls to me. Next we have Oxidized Olive. I need to revisit this shade because that shade, oh my lordy, that is gorgeous. And next we have the shade Magnetic Maple. In the pan they all look pretty similar, but they are definitely different, as you can see. There we are. This is the shade Fractal Freesia. This is kind of like, it's kind of like a scattered, glittery topper. This is Orchid Overload. I might even like this one more. They're similar. First we have Potent Petal, which I love. That's a pretty one. Now we have Defiant Dahlia, which you can tell I really love. Here is a swatch of that one for you guys. This would be easier with a brush. I love the reflect in there. Super gorgeous. Again, one of my favorites. And lastly, we have Chilled Cherry. I'm just going to swatch it down here for you guys. So pretty because it has, again, that like little bit of a pinky blackened cherry thing going on, but it's still very cool. They just do a really good job with their shades. And lastly, we have this little shadow from Jones Road, and it is the 1 second Just a Sec shadow in the shade Icy Pink. And I'm not a fan. It looks really weird on my eyes. It looks like dry, which is kind of bizarre. I wonder if some of the other shades are better though, so let me know if you guys have tried other shades. Oh, and I actually do have one more shadow back here, and it's from Marc Jacobs. Yeah, I mean, they're no longer around, but this was the shade, this was Topaz Flash, and look at this. Ooh, Woo! That is like New Year's in a pot. Like all these different reflective glitters in here. It's still super smooth and bronzy. These were really beautiful. They were like a more intense version of the Scattered Lights or the Bodyography Pigments. Alright everyone, so that was a long one, but I hope you really enjoyed it, and I will have all of these products linked down below for you guys. If you appreciated the video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. Thank you guys for being here, and I will see you in my next one.